The desert air shimmered like molten glass. Staff Sergeant Pike tossed her the rifle with a smirk. "Hold this for the men, sweetheart!" Laughter rippled down the firing line. Riley Hart said nothing. She gripped the $40 million prototype and waited. 1,000 meters. Miss. 2,000. Miss. At 3,020, even the computer quit. Pike cursed the heat and the distance. Then Riley spoke. "Permission for one shot." "Sir." They laughed again. She disabled the AI, read the wind like her father taught her, and fired. 3 seconds of silence, then impact confirmed. Dead center. Pike froze. "Not impossible," Riley said quietly. "Just human. Before we begin, tell us, where are you watching from, and if you believe honor and courage still matter, help keep their legacy alive." The desert shimmered like molten glass. Waves of heat rolled off the firing line at Yuma Proving Ground, where a dozen soldiers squinted into the blinding light. Among them stood Private Riley Hart, the only woman in the advanced ballistics program, and the one nobody took seriously. Sergeant Colin Pike barked over the wind. "Hold the rifle for the men. Sweetheart." Laughter followed like shrapnel. Riley didn't respond. She simply nodded, steady hands gripping the matte black prototype rifle, the XM9 Nomad, a $40 million experiment designed to make human intuition obsolete. Pike strutted forward, grinning. "Careful. That scope costs more than your training." Captain Ward, the test director, adjusted his headset. "All right, gentlemen. Range sequence starts at 1,000 meters. Let's see what the AI can do." The rifle's digital interface hummed to life, calculating wind, temperature, and rotation. Pike took the first position. He was the base's Pride Special Forces background, triple decorated. He fired twice, 2 misses. He cursed under his breath, blaming the heat mirage. At 2,700 meters, even the computer struggled. The desert air twisted light like liquid, bending bullets off course. Riley watched silently from the sidelines, eyes tracking the faint shimmer that only a few ever learned to see. To her, the air wasn't chaos, it was conversation. She could feel the invisible movement of wind slipping across sand and steel. Pike slammed the magazine out, muttering, "Damn optics are off." Captain Ward frowned. "We need at least one hit at 3,000. The data won't mean anything otherwise." He turned toward Pike. "Adjust the system." "Already did." Pike snapped, sweat dripping down his temples. He didn't notice the subtle change in mirage, a silent spiral forming across the valley floor, but Riley did, and in that moment, memory flooded back, her father's voice low, calm. "Somewhere in the mountains of Montana. If you can smell rain before it falls, you're already reading the air." She saw herself again as a kid, barefoot on pine needles, tracing the wind with her fingertips. That same stillness lived in her now. Not nerves. Focus. When the last attempt failed, Pike tossed the rifle toward her. "Hold this. Don't touch anything." Riley caught it before it hit the ground, the weight familiar alive. Her fingers brushed the adjustment ring. She noticed the auto-correct fighting itself, digital systems overcompensating with each shift. That's why Pike kept missing. The computer was second-guessing him. Ward noticed her hesitation. "Something wrong." "Private." She hesitated, then said quietly, "Sir, the AI's counteracting manual input. It's reading his corrections as errors." Pike turned sharply. "You trying to lecture me?" Rookie Ward raised a hand. Let her finish. "If you go full auto or full manual, it'll stabilize. But half and half, it's blind." The silence was heavy enough to crush. Pike sneered. 15 years in Special Forces. And I'm getting advice from a supply clerk. Ward's expression darkened. "Watch it, Sergeant." But the damage was done. The tension had teeth now. Minutes later, Pike failed again, another miss at 2,950 meters. Ward sighed. "All right, we're done here." That's when Riley spoke. "Sir, permission for one shot?" Every head turned. Pike laughed. "You're kidding." Ward studied her face. Calm, measured. "One round. Make it count." Riley dropped to prone position, adjusted the Nomad's scope, and did the unthinkable. She disabled the computer. The lights on the interface went dark. Someone whispered, "She's going manual." Riley ignored the noise. She watched the flags, the dust devils, the trembling shimmer of air. Each element folded into her instinct, the world narrowing until only the wind remained. Her breath slowed, half in, half out. Trigger squeeze smooth, deliberate. The rifle cracked, echoing off canyon walls. 3 seconds of silence, then a puff of dust at the far ridge. Dead center. Impact confirmed. A technician whispered, voice trembling. 3020 meters. First round hit. Ward's clipboard slipped from his hand. Without assistance, Riley stood, safety engaged. "Yes, sir." For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Pike took one step back, eyes wide. "That's impossible." Ward looked at her, almost smiling. Not impossible, just human. The others watched as she walked off the line, boots crunching over the hot sand. The wind caught her hair, twisting it across her cheek like smoke. Somewhere behind her, a voice muttered. Did that really just happen? Riley didn't answer. She was already listening to the air, its patterns, its rhythm, its truth. And for the first time, Yuma's endless desert seemed to whisper her name. The video of Riley's shot spread through Yuma like wildfire. By noon, every range officer, tech, and recruit had replayed it frame by frame, trying to understand how she'd done it. 3 kilometers. No computer. One shot. Inside the control trailer, Captain Ward stood with Dr. Lila Atwood, the project physicist. They watched the slow-motion footage again, the dust plume, the impact, the instant confirmation. Atwood finally said, "The AI's calibration couldn't see the distortion. She could..." Ward frowned. "You're saying she predicted a mirage shift?" Atwood nodded. "There's a rare effect out here, atmospheric shear layers colliding. It's chaos to a sensor, but visible to a trained eye." She paused. "Or to someone born reading wind." Before Ward could answer, the door slammed open. Sergeant Pike stormed in, face still flushed with embarrassment. "I want it on record Private Hart violated testing protocols and manipulated classified hardware." Ward didn't flinch. "She asked permission. I gave it. She humiliated the program in front of civilians," Pike snapped. Voice rising, Atwood cut in quietly. "No, Sergeant. She validated it." Pike turned toward her, fists tight. "You're defending insubordination." Ward stepped forward, his tone dropping cold. "You're mistaking competence for defiance." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Pike turned and left, slamming the door hard enough to shake the trailer. Atwood exhaled. That man's pride could power a generator. Ward glanced back at the frozen frame of Riley's shot. Maybe it just met its limit. Outside, Riley sat alone near the perimeter fence, watching the horizon shimmer. The wind rolled soft across the sand, same as always, but she could read its moods like music. In her mind, her father's voice returned again. Faint, steady. "Fire isn't the enemy, Riley. It's the wind that decides where it goes." A flashback hit Montana wildfires when she was 16. Her father, a volunteer smoke jumper, had taught her how to read heat plumes twisting above the trees. He called it the thermal braid, 3 invisible currents that warned when a fire would turn. Riley remembered the night it saved their lives. They'd seen the air twist, and her father had shouted to move seconds before the blaze roared uphill. That same pattern had danced in Yuma's desert air before she fired. A shadow crossed her view, Captain Ward. He stopped beside her, hands on his hips. "You've caused quite the problem." She gave a faint smile. "I seem to do that a lot." Ward sat beside her, squinting into the heat. "You were right about the AI's misread." "Doctor." Atwood confirmed it. He hesitated, then added, "Command wants you transferred." Riley's heart skipped. "Transferred to Fort Moore. Long-range development detachment." He looked at her. "They build doctrine there, and they're requesting you." For a moment, she said nothing. The thought of leaving Yuma the range, the silence felt strange, but she remembered Pike's laughter, the smirks, the disbelief. Maybe it was time. "What about him?" she asked quietly. Ward tilted his head. "Pike, he'll be answering to headquarters by morning. He'll survive embarrassed, but alive." He stood, brushing sand from his uniform. "You, on the other hand, might just change how the army shoots." That night, Yuma slept under a violet sky. Riley sat on her bunk, packing what little she owned: a field notebook, a photo of her father, and a single brass casing from the shot. Outside, the desert wind moaned like something ancient and alive. In the officers' quarters, Ward recorded his report. Private Hart demonstrated visual atmospheric interpretation beyond current optical systems, recommend advanced training and classified clearance. He paused before adding, "She's not guessing. She's reading physics." At dawn, a convoy idled near the hangar. Atwood waited by the transport ramp, clipboard in hand. "You sure you're ready for Fort Moore?" Riley smiled faintly. "The air's thicker there. Easier to listen to." Atwood laughed softly. "You really think of wind as alive, don't you?" Riley met her eyes. "It's never lied to me yet." The engines roared to life, drowning out everything else. Ward approached, extending his hand. "Hart, don't let them box you in. Whatever happens there, keep your instincts." She shook his hand firmly. "Yes, sir." He stepped back, saluting her as the ramp closed. The transport lifted into the dawn, cutting through waves of rising heat. Below, Yuma shrank into a blur of steel and sand. For the first time, Riley wasn't just following orders, she was being trusted with something bigger. Atwood watched until the aircraft disappeared. She turned to Ward, who still stood by the runway. "She doesn't know what she started, does she?" Ward smiled faintly. "Not yet." The wind swept across the base again, carrying dust and a whisper that sounded almost like a promise. And far above, heading east, Riley Hart began the next chapter of her legend. The heat of Arizona was gone. Now it was the thick red clay of Georgia that clung to Riley's boots as she stepped off the truck at Fort Moore. The air felt heavier here, humid, electric, alive in a different way. Rows of concrete barracks stretched along the range road. Posters lined the hallway walls, photographs of the Army's finest marksmen. All men, all staring down from their frames like gatekeepers. "Private Hart," a voice called. She turned to see Major Grant, commander of the long-range development detachment. Behind him, a tall man in fatigues leaned against a railing, watching her with a quiet smirk. "That's Staff Sergeant Owen Briggs," Grant said. "Top shooter on base. He'll get you settled in." Briggs extended a hand. "Welcome to Fort Moore. Heard you're the one who made that desert shot." His tone was polite, but his eyes measured her. "Guess we'll find out if it was luck," she said evenly. Briggs grinned. "Fair enough. We've got a range test at 1600. You're on the roster." "Today," he nodded. "The wind doesn't wait." By noon, the firing line shimmered under a thick haze. Briggs took position first, his group landing tight within 2 inches. Then Riley lay prone, calm as the earth beneath her. She read the ripples in the air beyond the berm. A slight crosswind shifted, subtle but visible in the tree line. 5 shots, all bullseye. A murmur spread among the spotters. Major Grant lowered his binoculars. Grouping confirmed 1.8 inches. "That's a record." Briggs gave a low whistle. "You're not shooting. You're listening." That night, the barracks were quiet except for the sound of rain. Riley sat by the window, cleaning her rifle. The storm outside pulsed like a living thing. Thunder rolled. For a moment, she could almost hear her father's voice again, whispering across time. "The wind never lies. Riley, people do." The next morning, she woke to find a message pinned to her locker. "Competition round 2, 2240 m, under stress conditions." Beneath it, a handwritten note. "Let's see if you can outrun me. Briggs." The challenge was set. They would sprint half a mile in full gear, then fire 1 round each within 30 seconds. Grant and half the detachment gathered to watch. "Ready," the range officer shouted. Briggs winked, Try to keep up. Montana. Riley smiled thinly. I usually lead. The whistle blew. They ran hard, boots pounding through mud, lungs burning. By the time she dropped behind the rifle, her heartbeat synced with the wind's rhythm. 28 seconds. She steadied her aim, feeling the breath of air shift across her cheek. She fired. Impact confirmed. Briggs shot a second later just off center. He looked at her, panting, then laughed. You're not aiming. You're conducting weather. Later, in the mess hall. Soldiers whispered her name. The woman from Yuma, the one who outshot Briggs. That evening, Major Grant summoned her to his office. 2 men in dark suits stood inside, both wearing visitor badges. Grant gestured toward them. Riley, meet Lawson Reed and Captain Alvarez. Joint Special Operations Command. Reed smiled politely. We've followed your data since Yuma. Your intuition with atmospheric flow remarkable. Alvarez set a folder on the desk. We're assembling a special team. Classified. The mission requires extreme range precision. Riley's pulse quickened. Operational very, Reed replied. This isn't competition work. It's live. Grant leaned forward. They need someone who can do what machines can't. Someone who trusts instinct. Riley studied their faces, then said quietly, When do I leave? Reed smiled. Soon. You'll receive orders within 72 hours. He extended a hand. Welcome to Task Group Orion, after they left. Grant leaned back in his chair, half amused. Fort Moore hasn't seen a soldier like you in decades. Riley lowered her gaze. I'm just doing what I was taught. Outside. The rain had stopped, leaving steam rising from the asphalt. Briggs waited under the eaves, hands in his pockets. So, he said, Orion. Huh, that's big. They recruit legends, she said. Adjusting her pack, Briggs chuckled. Then you'll fit right in. He hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, Hart, you've earned my respect. Riley nodded. Respect's just wind in the right direction. Sergeant, it shifts fast. They shared a faint smile. Then lightning flashed far to the east, white against the clouds. She looked toward it, thoughtful. Somewhere beyond that storm waited a new mission, one the machines still couldn't understand. But she could. She raised her face to the wind. It felt like an old friend calling her name, and when the thunder rolled again, Riley Hart was already listening. The mountains rose like jagged teeth against a steel blue sky. Snow whipped across the ridge as Task Group Orion set up their position. It was dawn in northern Colorado, thin air, thin patience, and one impossible target. Range 2,880 meters. Wheeler, the team sniper, murmured through his scope. Below, a fortified compound gleamed in the pale light, guarded by mercenaries in black fatigues. Inside was Anton Volkov, arms broker, and the reason Riley Hart was here. Captain Reed crouched beside her, his breath fogging the glass of his tablet. Intel says he'll be in his office for a 10-minute video call. Bulletproof glass, layered steel frame. We've got one chance. Riley nodded, eyes fixed on the valley. Then we make it count. The Mk-22 rifle rested before her, modified for high-altitude precision. Every part of it gleamed like something alive, the bolt, the optics, the long carbon barrel. But the true weapon was the silence between her breaths. Wind screamed through the peaks, unpredictable and wild. Wheeler muttered, There's no clear read. It's jumping every 30 seconds. Riley watched the snow drift, the trees bend, the shimmering distortion rising like ghosts. This isn't random, she whispered. Her gloved finger traced invisible arcs in the air. It's a thermal braid, 3 converging streams. My father taught me how to read this. Wheeler frowned. You mean like wildfire patterns exactly? It cycles. When the third stream reverses, the valley clears for 5 seconds. He looked through the scope again. I'll be damned. You're right. Minutes crawled by. The compound stirred with movement. Volkov entering his office. Reed's voice crackled in her earpiece. Target window opening in 20. Riley steadied her breathing, tuning out everything but the pulse of wind. Through the scope, She saw Volkov's reflection, a silhouette behind reinforced glass. She whispered to herself, "Wind never lies." The air stilled. Perfect alignment. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked once, echoing like thunder rolling down the mountain. 2 seconds later, the glass shattered in a silent bloom of frost and light. "Impact confirmed," Wheeler said, awe breaking his voice. "Target neutralized. Single round." Reed exhaled sharply. "Pack up. We're done here." Snow began to fall as they disassembled the rifle. The team moved fast, smooth, quiet, professional. But Riley paused for one last glance at the valley below. The storm swallowed the compound. It looked peaceful now, as if the wind itself had erased the violence. She felt a flicker of guilt, not regret. Just wait. 48 hours later, they were back at Fort Liberty. Debriefing was brief, efficient. Reed met her in the corridor afterward, holding a sealed envelope. "Command's calling it textbook perfect," he said. "They're naming the ballistic model after you, the Hart method." Riley blinked. "I didn't invent it." "No," he said quietly. "You rediscovered something we forgot trust." As he walked away, she felt the words settled deeper than she expected. Later that night, alone in her quarters, she opened her messages. One caught her eye, a name she didn't expect. Colin Pike. The email was short. "For what it's worth, you were right about the wind. C.P." Riley read it twice, then smiled faintly. Not triumph closure. Weeks passed. A new directive arrived. Yuma's range renamed the Hart Precision Facility. Captain Ward sent a photo her old firing line, now marked with her nameplate. The message beneath it read, "Told you they'd remember you." She saved it without replying. Some victories didn't need words. The wind outside her window howled softly, like an old friend greeting her again. At sunrise, she reported to the parade field. A crowd had gathered for the ceremony officers, recruits, veterans. Among them stood a young private, eyes wide with admiration. Captain Hart, the girl, asked shyly, "Are you really the one who made that mountain shot?" Riley handed her a single brass casing from her pocket. "Keep it," she said gently. "The wind never lies. You just have to listen." Trumpets echoed as a transport roared overhead, slicing through the dawn. Reed approached quietly. "You're deploying again." "Another high-value target." Riley nodded once. "Same wind. New direction." As she walked toward the tarmac, snow began to fall soft, endless, patient. She looked up, feeling it melt against her cheek. Somewhere in that stillness, she could almost hear her father's voice again. "The air doesn't choose sides. Riley, it just tells the truth." She smiled, adjusting her rifle case as the engines thundered alive, and when the hatch closed behind her, the legend of Captain Riley Hart moved with the wind, quiet, precise, unstoppable. If you enjoyed the story, consider sending a super chat to help bring more stories like this. Now, click on the video on the screen to hear another story that's just as powerful and captivating, with courage, sacrifice, and a choice that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about duty and justice.